Thank you so much. That pleasure has absolutely been mutual. It has it has just been the most wonderful gift in what has been a very difficult process over many years to discover such good friends. I really appreciate having met Christine and met so many others. It's great to see Peter. It's great to see Alan again. Great to see David. And I'm sure I will meet everyone eventually. So it is really lovely to have had this new opportunity for connection. So it is a really great pleasure to be here. And so I bring you greetings from Canberra Baptist Church, which is not shivering away down there, though that's what you all think. It is a lovely warm place with lovely warm heaters under the pews. So please come and visit whenever you like. And I also bring you greetings from Gershon Nimborka, who was at the wedding yesterday. He said, please pass on my greetings to Barara. And I can bring you greetings from Seaforth Baptist as well, having been there. But I do want to bring you greetings from that wider Open Baptist movement, because you and your leaders have just journeyed with us in this commitment that the good news of Jesus is for all people without qualification. And we want to be part of creating communities that are communities of genuine welcome. It was also kind of serendipitous that I preached a series on David 2 years ago. So when Christine and David said that you were doing this, I thought, oh, goody, I can pull that sermon out of the back drawer and use it again. It never quite works that way. You end up looking at it and kind of rewriting it. But I also was really glad to do that because it's such a fascinating story. There's sort of this spectrum. At one end, it's a little bit Game of Thrones like, in all the machinations that are going on in David's kingdom. But I guess at the other end, it's kind of Throne of Grace like, that this is where we experience God's amazing mercy and God's grace and God's blessing for all humankind that's traced through this story. I do want to acknowledge that this is very difficult subject matter. So if you do need to step out and sit quietly somewhere else or go for a walk, please don't feel any embarrassment in doing that. A few years ago, at the National Library in Canberra, I saw a copy of the Book of Hours. And there was an image of Bathsheba bathing that had been vandalized, scratched out with a quill, kind of scribbled on by monks apparently demonstrating their piety. So, although the reading that we've had this morning focuses on two male actors, David and Nathan, I didn't want the story just to kind of be talking about Bathsheba in the third person and to be wiping her off the page. So I decided to kind of retell this story in Bathsheba's voice, which involves a slight costume change. I am Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam, granddaughter of Ahithophel. Before I was the wife of Uriah the Hittite or the wife of King David of Israel, my identity was my father's and my grandfather's names. Their deeds are recorded by the scribes. My father is famous for his soldiering. He was one of David's famous 30. And my grandfather is famous for his wise counsel. It was as though he was the oracle of God, it is said, a skill that lifted him high and brought him low. No chronicler, however, records my mother's name or my grandmother's name. But I rejoice that you know my name, Bathsheba. It means daughter of the oath or daughter of the covenant that God made with Abraham to bless him so that through him all the families of the earth would be blessed. All the families of the earth. Mine is one of the few women's names recorded in the Hebrew Scriptures. 100 or so women's names and over 1,000 men's names. And it is rare that you hear our voices. And who would believe us if you did? For centuries, the church has equivocated about calling the actions of my Lord the King rape. For how can the story of David, the sinner, the terrible sinner, be reconciled with the stories of David, the hero, the great king? We are so certain that we can tell evil from good, truth from falsehood, reliable witness from unreliable witness. We are so sure, like kings who go to war each spring, that we know who the enemy is. But we should not be so confident, for that year the enemy was within the palace walls. For David himself was the enemy. Some deal with this difficult story by staying silent. The scribes of Chronicles leave it out of the record altogether. Others claim that what happened was not rape. They use other words, adultery, infidelity. Perhaps we were in love, they say. Surely love cannot be sin. And others lay the blame at my naked feet, painting me as a seductress, exhibiting myself on a rooftop, rather than being spied from a rooftop. And then scratching away at the image of me in their prayer books, unless they too are led into sin by a woman. But God knew. God saw. And this was the first grace for me. God heard my cries. God heard my cries of lament for all that had been lost. And God was not pleased and sent Nathan to my Lord the King. And Nathan told him a story, an innocuous, distant-sounding story about injustice, about a man who takes what belongs to another, who takes the life of another's. And it was the same word that David said to the messengers to go and to get me, to take me. And I was reminded of the prophet Samuel's words so many years ago, warning the people that this would be the way of kings. They would take our sons and they would take our daughters. I am thankful that, like the prophet Nathan, people break the silence in your time about such things. Some would prefer to keep these things hidden, but I remember my grandmother crouched beside the fire, the light flickering on her face, telling me that sin was like a crack in a pot, splintering, splitting, until the pot must be thrown away. The king confessed. He confessed his sin. He acknowledged fully the evil that he had done. No one doubted his sincerity. But sin has consequences, and the cracks from his sin continued to spread. And it was our child that was caught in the disintegration. Many times I've railed against God for the loss of yet another innocent life. And other times I have wondered if the prophet was only speaking what would have been anyway, for the child was frail. But at other times, and this is what has held me all these years, I know that first grace again, that God knew, that God heard my cries and saw me, that deep as a mother's love, God loved my child and felt with me the agony of losing a firstborn son. And another grace, an almost unwelcome grace, came slowly. I watched my Lord the King fast and pray and plead with God for the life of our child, despite what the prophet had said. And I saw that faith could flicker in the heart of someone who had done wrong, that faith could survive all the suffering, that although sin had consequences, God's mercy did not abandon any of us. As I say, it was a strange grace, and it was my grace, and it may not be what happens for another. There were few choices before me. But when our child died, we grieved together, and we made a new beginning. And the child of our union we called Shalom, peace, or as you know him, Solomon. But the sword that devours, now one and then another, those were the words of my Lord the King when Uriah was so cruelly killed. Continued to devour. First, Amnon raped his daughter Tamar, and then his son Absalom killed Amnon, and then Absalom rebelled against David, aided by my grandfather, who couldn't forget the dishonor that was done to our family. I am old now, and soon I will sleep like my Lord the King. But again, who would believe my story now that my son Solomon would sit on a throne and I would sit on a throne beside him like my grandfather, counseling a king? Perhaps you will dismiss this as the dream of an old woman. But as I look back at all the cracks running through this story, at the sword that devoured one and then another, at the swords that will pierce other mothers' souls, I also see shining in the cracks God's grace. Grace that sees and shares all our suffering. Grace that does not hold back but confronts and exposes evil. And grace that works God's strange and great mercy. I, Bathsheba, daughter of the covenant, in my descendants have become a conduit for the blessing that goes on, and the blessing that blesses all the families of the earth. Can I invite you to join with me in reading Psalm 51? So I think we have some words for that on the screen. Just to close, as we reflect on God's grace, well, close this part. You've got discussion to do. As we reflect on God's grace and how it runs through the stories of our lives, can I invite you to read this with me? Have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. According to your abundant mercy, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. For I know my transgressions, and my sin is ever before me. Against you, you alone, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you are justified in your sentence and blameless when you pass judgment. Indeed, I was born guilty, a sinner when my mother conceived me. You desire truth in the inward being. Therefore, teach me wisdom in my secret heart. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. Wash me, and I shall be whiter than snow. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones that you have crushed rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out all my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and put a new and right spirit within me. Do not cast me away from your presence, and do not take your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation, and sustain in me a willing spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Belinda. Thank you for introducing us to Bathsheba in a new way. That was engaging, wasn't it? Really was, yeah. Something as simple as moving your poncho from there to there, all of a sudden you were Bathsheba. So thank you. Um, so Belinda's given us some questions for discussion right now, before we have some brunch together. I've got them printed out. We'll put them on the table. I really encourage you to engage with it. It may well be that you as a table think, oh, the third question is more engaging than the other ones, but I encourage you to really read the questions through and lean into the question that resonates with you. They're on the screen there if that's more helpful. Um, Belinda, should I just read the three of them aloud so we've all got them collectively in our head? How do the different ways people have responded to the story of David and Bathsheba relate to our handling of allegations and abuse today? Um, that's a great question, isn't it? The second one, 2 Samuel 11:4, speaks of David sending messages to get or to take Bathsheba. It harkens back to 1 Samuel 8, where the prophet Samuel warns the people of Israel about the ways of kings who will be takers. In what ways do you see this modus operandi of being takers at work in our world or in our lives? What alternatives to taking do you also see, and who models these alternatives for you? Um, so a lot in that question, but revolving around that idea of being a taker. And the third one, the story of Bathsheba and David, is one of the consequences of sin. Justice, a kind of rough justice, and the consequences of salvation, forgiveness and mercy. Do you see justice or mercy have the upper hand in your estimation? So I really invite you to engage with these three questions as a table. Those of you down the back, we don't want you to miss out. So come and join if you'd like. Come and join a table, and let's grab about what should we say, about 10 or 15 minutes, and just engage with these questions, and then we'll come back.